Hello and welcome to More Than a Game, a podcast about the A-League, Premier Leagues and more. My name's Tommie C, and this is our annual Premier League season review pod. Joining us on the pod this time around, we've got George all the way from London. How you doing, George?
Good guys. Good to be back. It's been a while.
It has, mate. And look, I mean, for all of us, it's been a little while, right? Like we're pretty much only doing like monthly pods at the moment. Colby, I see you're smiling, noting that we've just recorded the A-League pod like literally 10 minutes ago. So it hasn't actually been that long, but stick with me.
Coming off a long run up.
Keep the mystique. Keep the mystery.
Exactly. Speaking of...
Well, people...
Go.
Tommie, thank you. You're about to introduce me and hi to everyone because it's a good point because people may not listen. We've got a diverse audience and people may not listen to both the Premier League and the A-League. We know some people are with us just for the Premier League and some people are with us just for the A-League. So if you haven't also just sat through our A-League podcast, hello and welcome back to the pod because, you haven't listened to us in a while. So happy to have you back.
Surely those diehards are doing back-to-back. So
yeah. Back to back. George, speaking of Mystique, I'm loving the lighting that you've got going on. All of our YouTube or Spotify listeners or viewers will be able to see your amazing lighting going on there. You look like you're straight out of you look like you're the villain straight out of an opera or something like that. I'm really enjoying it.
Well, we moved into a new place late last year, so it's probably the first pod I'm doing in the new living room. So.
Is it candlelit?
Oh, Jesus.
Morning sun, Tommie. It's morning sun vibes, in South London. So
well, good morning to you, George. It's great to have you on the pod anyway. Last but not least, Mikey, welcome aboard again. Great to have you on the pod. How are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing much different to 10 minutes ago when there was no podcast going on back then. I'm not running on fumes at the moment. I'm good to go for the Premier League.
Mate, I remember you were saying that you've got a party or something to go to tonight, and that's why we're recording a little bit early, right? So
yeah. I don't know. I don't know at this point.
I wish I was at that party that you're going to be going to just to see you running off of fumes for tonight, but I reckon you'll find the reserves.
I'll dig down deep.
The other person who should be joining us is Damo. Daddy Damo's doing a little bit of daddy duty right now. So he's going to be calling through his team-by-team reviews, but we've also still got a little bit of Check the Tapes featuring Damo as well. Of course, as part of our season review pod, we'll be doing Check the Tapes for all of the panel members. So check that out shortly. But before we get into Check the Tapes and our team by team reviews, we're going to talk a little bit about, I guess, some of the awards that were handed out recently, and then just sort of some more about, I guess, the season overall. But look, I guess I want to start with player of the season because, like, Erling Haaland scooped up basically all of the awards over the last couple of weeks that he could win. And so I kind of want to just put an asterisk next to all of these discussions and say, yeah, after Haaland, if Haaland hadn't have existed or if he was ineligible to win these awards, who would win them? So the first one's player of the season. Got a couple of options here. Kevin De Bruyne, Saka, Rodri, Kane, Rashford. I'm not sure if there's any obvious ones that I've forgotten. Or who do you think should have won it if not for Haaland? Mikey,
I think Ødegaard's a bit stiff not to be in that list. Sorry, I'll jump in, Tommie.
No, look, I think that's a good shout.
A couple of the Arsenal boys could have been in there.
Yeah, I mean, I had the impact of it's sort of hard to split them, but Zinchenko at Arsenal for his leadership. I know they sort of he got injured and sort of tailed off a little bit towards the end of the season, and then Gabby Jesus for his first sort of half of the season as well. Might be one. I've got a bit of I don't know if anyone else had Bernardo Silva in there, but he had such a strong sort of finish to the season. I got a bit of a rogue one for you boys, and just bear with me for it. A little bit of Chelsea bias here, but Enzo Fernandez coming No,
Is this like me saying that Brisbane Roar's manager should have won Manager of the Year? Is this what you're going at? Like he's just terrible. He was good in an average team. Is that what you're getting?
comes in halfway through the season, doesn't speak any English, plays every game. You know, spare a thought for poor Enzo. So,
Poor Enzo.
Didn't he come in on huge money and expectations and do nothing?
Played every game, Colby, and you know it was
There's
basically
plenty.
every minute of every
Put
game.
in the minutes.
All right,
Put in the minutes.
George. I'll give you one.
Consistency.
I'll give you one. I'll give him the participation award because he played every game.
The coaches award.
Players player. Players player.
Fans player. George's player. All right, the next one I had was signing of the season. Again, excluding Haaland because Haaland just wipes this out. But there's a couple of good candidates for this one. Ones that I thought stood out to me were Gabby Jesus, as George mentioned. Casemiro's a solid shout. Morgan Gibbs-White, I know Damo rated him. He was obviously very good for Forest. João Palhinha at Fulham. A little bit of mayo on this one. Ben Mee, he was obviously very good as well for Brentford. Great pickup from Burnley. Boys, anyone I missed out, or anyone that you really want to double down on and say that you think that they were signing of the season?
I thought early on in the season, Gabby Jesus was like unbelievably a good signing. I mean, I know he tailed off injuries and all of that type of thing, but when at the start of the season, I genuinely thought, like, who's going to stop Arsenal? And I think a lot of people thought, who's going to stop Arsenal until very, very late in the season. But I can absolutely see why you've put an asterisk next to Haaland, because the obvious answer to all of these questions is Eric Haaland.
Exactly, and like it doesn't make for a good podcast, right? It's just saying how good Haaland is, and I feel like I just don't want to even like he almost deserves to have his own segment, like at some point in the pod to say how good was he, right? And maybe I can make check the tapes, the segment where we talk exclusively about Haaland, because there's a zinger in there about Haaland, which I'm going to have you all waiting for.
That's a good teaser, Tommie. I like that.
Yeah, well played, huh? Boys, I know Damo really liked Morgan Gibbs-White. He was very good in the championship last year, and you don't always see players transition well from the championship into the Premier League. But I tell you what, Morgan Gibbs-White was a bit of a one-man show at Forest, especially in the second half of the season. I felt he was very, very impressive, and you wonder if I think he probably needs another season at Forest just to really cement himself as a Premier League standard player. But you almost wouldn't be shocked if you saw him go elsewhere. But I guess Forest paid so much for him that you can't see him really going for anything less than about 50 million at the moment.
Yeah, the funny thing about him was they signed him and Lingard basically, and
yeah,
Lingard's been released last I heard, and you know the team's being built around Gibbs-White now. So,
which I mean, it's funny. You don't often see teams making the smart decision, right? You'd almost expect that they'd re-sign Lingard, and Gibbs-White would get like frozen out or something. Like that's the standard thing that a team is going to do, right? But it's good to see that they've let go of Lingard, who didn't really make much of an impression this season. And
getting back to the Hammers, Tommie.
No, mate, he's burned his bridges there. We don't want him.
I feel this is going to be a check the tapes, isn't it? Well, I remember we were calling him Jailings back in the day.
Yeah, we were talking about his jersey, remember? Whether or not he was getting Jailings on the back or not.
That's right. That's the one.
Boys, young player of the season, obviously Haaland, the far and away candidate there. But Saka and Odegaard were the two Arsenal candidates that jumped out to me, as well as Willis Saliba. I thought he was a pretty solid shout for young player of the season as well. And you saw that once he got injured, things started to fall away for Arsenal a bit. But I tell you what, I'm going big on my boy Brennan Johnson. For me, he was a very solid shout for young player of the season. Anyone else?
Moises Caicedo.
Oh, that is a great shout and a very notable absentee from my list. Do you guys think he's going to end up staying at Brighton, or do you think he's off? Like, would you want him?
I think someone's going to snap him up. He's a real prospect.
Would you like to see him at Liverpool, mate?
I don't know if he's ready for like the kind of rebuild in midfield that Liverpool need. Like he's a player who's probably, I don't know if maybe he is ready. Like he's young and he's had a really, really impressive season. Yeah, Liverpool need a little bit more than Moises Caicedo in the midfield. But I mean, yeah, I think I'd be happy if I saw that he signed. Definitely.
I think the only concern for Liverpool or other teams that were scouting him would have been just how he got played off the park against the Socceroos recently in the Summers. So would obviously be of major concern for them. But I mean, maybe it just speaks to the quality in that Australian midfield.
GG, easy.
Boys manager of the season. This one, obviously, Haaland couldn't win, but the next best thing, Pep did win, which, again, I mean, it's another one of those things.
Robbery, Tommie.
100%. Like Pep took a team that was the best team in the league last season, added one of the best players in the world to that team, gave them another league title that they basically had to win in the last 5 rounds.
Won it. Yeah, they barely
exactly.
won it.
And then you give him like manager of the season. In fact, I don't think he did that good a job. Like, yeah, there was some tactical evolution, and the fact that he won the Premier League again, but by no means was he the best manager in the Premier League this year.
100%,
as far as
Tommie.
I'm concerned.
Meanwhile, Howe took a stinking team, added like Kieran Trippier, who was like doing okay in Spain, I think, and then like a Dan Burn and I don't know, a couple of other old socks, and then made it into a team that was challenging for the title. Incredible job.
100%. And the other two for me are Unai Emery. Obviously, was within probably 5 weeks of lifting the Premier League title for a very young but quality Arsenal team, and I don't think anyone really was expecting that they would go that close to challenging. I think a lot of people thought that they would challenge for top 4, but even that wasn't necessarily a given. So the fact that they were so good for so long this season, I think Arteta's done an incredible job. But my pick for manager of the year is actually not one of those 3. It's Unai Emery. For me, I thought he just did an incredible job to come in mid-season, replace Steven Gerrard, and I think everyone thought that team was underperforming under Gerrard, but for them to be that good as they were after Emery arrived, I thought it was just incredible. Like their form was basically only just behind Arsenal and City in the league, and like that was Champions League form basically, considering he joined mid-season. So they ended up finishing, I'm pretty sure they qualified for Europe next year, which is
they're in
incredible.
Europe.
Considering
I think if the league went on another 4 or 5 weeks, that they'd just keep going. They didn't want the season to end.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, he was manager of the season because like at the beginning of like when he took over, Villa were sort of amongst one of about 10 teams that was in a bit of a relegation scrap. So for him to take him really not just to the next level, but beyond the next level, was a pretty incredible achievement, I think.
The other one, Tommie, is Roberto De Zerbi. So coming in, and we'll touch on it later. I think I've got the Brighton review, but he came in when Potter moved to Chelsea, which was, if we cast our minds back, it was the international break and then the passing of the Queen in that period of time, and so came in on very short notice and was able to not transform Brighton, but was able to elevate them really.
You talk about some people talking about taking a team to the next level, and this was perfectly set up for De Zerbi to come in with and flesh out some new ideas with a squad that was ready for them. And like you talk sometimes about a team being in the right place at the right time, and this was the squad and the manager just perfectly intersecting with perfect timing. If it had been 12 months earlier or 12 months later, you're probably not getting the same result, but it was fantastic timing for those two parties. Biggest overachiever isn't necessarily like a Premier League award, but there was a couple of very strong candidates for biggest overachiever. Most of them we've already spoken about already in Arsenal and Brighton. Obviously, two massively, didn't massively overachieve, but did overachieve this season in a lot of people's eyes. Any other shouts for biggest overachiever though?
Not particularly, but I'd double down on Brighton there. I mean, the fact that your manager can get poached from a league rival mid-season and you seem to strengthen. I know we touched on it already, but I didn't see that coming. I thought Brighton were kind of done after that. And yeah, geez, I don't know if there's anything in the tapes for that, but yeah, big ups.
I think I doubled down on Newcastle from before. Let's not forget, I think they finished, let's see, I think it was like 10th or 11th last season, and to finish in third this season. Obviously the change in ownership happened and they did make some signings, but they didn't bring in Mbappe and others. Like they brought in Trippier, Dan Burn, and whoever else there was. Like they really overachieved, I think, to finish fourth and be really pushing in part of that title challenge.
Boys, I'm going to throw out two of my own overachieving candidates, and they were Brentford and Fulham. I think a lot of people probably would have pretty easily thought that Brentford might either drop back into sort of relegation fight after a promising first season in the Premier League, with that second season syndrome sort of thing eventuating, but it just never ended up happening. And they did very, very well, I felt, and surprised a lot of people. The fact that even with all of the stuff regarding Ivan Toney, it never really seemed to affect them a hell of a lot, and they just kept on keeping on and did a very, very good job in maintaining focus and keeping up both the performances and the results as the season wore on. The other one is Marco Silva and his boys Fulham, who I reckon all of us would have thought, or probably most of us would have had around the relegation zone, but for them to finish top half was pretty incredible. I think almost everyone thought that they were going to do a Fulham and go back down immediately, especially a really attacking coach like Milva. But it just never happened, and they never dropped off either, which was it was refreshing to not see them do a Fulham and go straight back down, and for them to be actually very, very competent and a really good football team this year.
Yeah, and you had like the signings of like Leno, Willian, like those guys who people thought were kind of washed, come in and have really solid seasons.
Which is crazy because Leno is a fantastic goalkeeper, right? Like he's firmly like mid-table, if not better, goalkeeper. So the fact that people would thought it might have said he was washed, just I don't know, reeks of ignorance as far as I'm concerned. All right, next up, biggest underachiever. Now, there's a pretty strong, clear first candidate for this, almost Haaland-esque in terms of who the biggest underachiever is in Chelsea, because I don't think, and I do have some check the tapes on this, sorry, George, but is there anyone else that anyone thinks could rival Chelsea for underachievement?
Got to be Leicester, surely.
I'm glad you brought up Leicester, Colby, considering I know that you're reviewing them, and we do have some check the tapes as well. As well. So, brace yourself for that, listeners, because that's a whopper that Colby dropped on the preseason on the preview app. For me, I thought Spurs were obviously not quite in the Chelsea or Leicester category, but just as the season wore on, just turned into a bigger and bigger shit show. For me,
Tommie,
West Ham, go on.
Oh, just before you have a rant about West Ham, is this the appropriate point? And I know you don't have this on the run sheet, but is this the appropriate point that we should mention the Ange to Spurs? I know it's been everywhere, and we're sick of hearing about it from Keep Up and whatever, but like some of our listeners might not subscribe to Keep Up and therefore not be too sick of hearing about it. Talk like Conte couldn't do the job, Jose couldn't do the job. It's a basket case. I mean, it's a very, it's a top 6 in theory Premier League club, which is amazing that he could be mentioned in that sphere. But is it a bit of a poison chalice? And like, what's he going to do that these? I've like full faith in Ange, but wowee, what a tough gig. It's not like going into Celtic, who are built to win the Scottish Premier League and sort of just make a top team better.
Yeah, and you remember the analogy that I made about De Zerbi and Potter, right? Like, this was a team that was already playing pretty progressive football, and like there was a reasonably positive culture around the club, right? Like, everyone was kind of like, yeah, we're overachieving. Like, how fun's this, right? But it's such a different vibe at Spurs, right? So, Mikey, I think you were about to jump in.
Yeah, I think people forget when Ange came into Celtic, it was already written off that they weren't going to win the league that season. Like, they were in such a basket case. I know it's a 2-horse race, but we talked about he was under pressure at the time, like, to get results. But even the most diehard Celtic fans knew they weren't going to win the league that season, and so I wouldn't.
He did an amazing job.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt him. He had some, rough results early on, but once he gets players playing in his system, I don't think it matters particularly which club he goes to. I think he'll get some type of result, whether that's winning something with Spurs. I don't know. I don't know if anyone can do that. But
yeah, that's more my point. Yeah.
yeah. But I don't think he'd be too much out of his, he wouldn't be too much out of depth, I don't think.
I think it depends. Like, the biggest issue with Spurs is, like, what are their expectations, right? Like, what are they trying to achieve? Is it a bit like the Poch era where, just having like some positive, like, good vibes around the club is kind of enough, and not actually winning something is sufficient? Or do they want to win like a Carabao Cup or like a Europa League or something like that? Do they want to challenge for top 4? Do they want to try?
I think they need to get that monkey off their back, Tommie. They just need any silverware.
Yeah, and like it's almost like I almost feel like they've fallen into the same trap as like late era Wenger Arsenal, where like it was top 4 and was the only important thing, right? And once that becomes your sole objective, then like it's just about trying to achieve that. But any sort of bumps along the way in achieving that goal mean that it's just like the place becomes really, really toxic. And I guess that's where it's at, right? Like, if top 4 isn't the be all and end all, and they do just want to win a Carabao Cup or just win a Europa League or a Conference League or something like that, that's fine. And like, just like that sort of expectations reset might actually really help them. Be a sense that that's just not where Spurs fans are at, or where the club is at. So yeah.
I just don't think there's a heap of other options at the moment. I know there's every manager in the door would accept the job at Spurs, I'm assuming, if you haven't got a job already. But I think if he gets the offer, he's going to go. And another thing to note is Scott Munn is now the director at Tottenham, and he was the head of Melbourne Heart to begin with. And he nearly signed Ange in 2010 to talk about a sliding doors moment. But didn't. So maybe he won't make the same mistake again. Who knows?
That is interesting, right? Like, and you almost sense that if people will write off Ange as just like Scott Munn's boy, because like if he does end up getting signed by Spurs, like straight off the bat, that's probably another thing that he's got to contend with, right? I will mention West Ham very briefly as a team that I felt underachieved. Obviously, they spent a bunch of money this year, so I think like me and some other people were expecting them to do better. Finished 14th, finished 7th last year, so quite a drop off. But hey, we're still in a European final to be played on Thursday morning, so you can't take that away from us. Boys, one final note is just about City's title win. And I mentioned how, like, I don't think you could make a particular case that this is a better City team than last year, or that, and Pep has sort of evolved the team stylistically a little bit. But I don't think you could say this is a classic Pep team by any stretch of the imagination. The important thing to note, though, is the over 100 FFP related charges that have been levelled at City this season, all the way back in February. Allegedly hid how much they'd spent and how much revenue they'd received between 2009 and 2018. If they are found guilty, and I can't remember who actually assigns the punishment. I think it's the Premier League, but or the independent like governing panel, or can't remember what they're called, but the punishments that they have available if they're found guilty range from points deductions, financial penalties, cancel of registration of certain players, and even relegation. So this is a pretty significant threat to City. But boys, specifically for this season, does it put a bit of an asterisk against this title, noting those charges that haven't been resolved yet?
I think it depends on what you think of financial fair play to begin with. I mean, whether you think it is a system to, stop clubs going bankrupt, whether to, protect clubs and fans, or whether it's about keeping the old guard in and stopping new money. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Manchester City weren't a rich club before 2008, and now they're probably one of the richest clubs in the world. So it really kind of depends how you think of these charges. But if there is an unfair advantage and they are found guilty, then the punishment comes. But I don't think it particularly puts an asterisk on the football achievements. No.
Colby, George, you disagree or agree with that?
Hard agree with that. It's a completely separate matter. Yeah, very serious allegations, and in terms of the management of the club. But yeah, in terms of the football stuff, I don't think it takes away from it. Obviously, they've been able to buy the likes of Erling Haaland and others, but they've also taken players like Akanji and made a pretty good player with some mistakes in his game, just amazing. And Rodri, I don't think he came in huge money. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not just out there, completely blowing other clubs out of the water financially. Obviously, they've got huge money behind them, but it's not like there's a lot of clubs in the Premier League that can still compete with them on that front.
I think they've been very considered with the money that they have spent. Like they've gone after specific targets, and you saw how they went after Laporte and Kyle Walker, and how they said that's the guy that we want, and they have spent a huge amount of money, but I can't really think of a particular player where I think to myself, oh geez, they've overspent there.
If you think about Chelsea outbid them for Cucurella at the start of the season, so I think they're, just like you said, Tommie, it's been more considered and topping up here and there. And, and a couple of seasons ago, they lost Aguero and obviously replaced him with Haaland, but it took a year for them to do that. So they were strikerless effectively.
And they still won the league in that year, didn't they?
Yeah. So I think, it's hard, but you have to kind of divorce the football from the, FFP, sports washing, all that. And just appreciate it, because it's some of the best football you'll see. When you got Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, De Bruyne, Haaland all linking up, it's we're not going to see that again probably in our lifetime. So,
just on that topic of sort of that post Aguero season where they won the title and basically sort of shithoused their way through to a bunch of 1-0 wins without a recognised striker. That for me was Pep's best achievement, because he's playing false nine, and he's done that before, but he was doing it this time without Messi, without a recognised striker, and he had an incredible midfield behind sort of the false nine, but still it was pretty incredible what he managed to achieve. I felt like that season.
Yeah, undeniably great manager, but now he's got a cheat code in Haaland, and he's had that in Messi and stuff like that. He's had those advantages before, but obviously he's one of the best, if not probably the best to ever manage. So he's it's not to take too much away from Pep.
If they miss out on the Champions League, it's probably a failure. So
that would be a bottle job to lose the final to Inter. So
yeah, that is
that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Alrighty, boys. That's it for that discussion. So next up, we're going to do check the tapes. This already there's been a couple of sort of sneak peeks or insights into how that's actually going to look. So just have to bear with me for a second, and I will get the first of our Premier League check the tape segment. So first up, this is what I'm just going to call a really frothy take from Mikey, and I think it really sets the tone for the rest of the pod. I hope so.
Ryan Fredericks, as Tommie will know, a solid defender from West Ham.
Sure.
A couple of others, Joe Rothwell from Blackburn. I think they've just signed Marcus Taverner from Borough. So some solid. Wowee.
Look, here at More Than a Game, we really pride ourselves on great tinny sounds, and that was something that really stood out. Not necessarily as a bad take, but just from a bad tinny, just not agreeing with Mikey there. So I wanted to share that with the listeners, as Mikey sometimes plays things, with a bit of a flat bat. So I wanted to get that one out there because it made me laugh.
Cheers.
That is excellent.
Oh, yes, here he is.
Are you practicing, mate? You've been practicing.
A whole season to practice.
What are those tinnies? I got to get hold of them.
Yeah.
Mwah, mwah. All right, here's Colby. Which, look, to be fair, this is not necessarily a check the tapes for Colby. This will make a bit more sense once I've played it though. But this is not a bad take from Colby.
Good. Around Thomas Partey with some sexual assault allegations. So unclear about what his status is going to be this season. So I've put him in the outs column because I'm assuming that the club's going to suspend him while these allegations are being dealt with in much the same way as we've seen with too many other players in the Prem when these kind of
Colby,
things crop up.
That I wanted to put in there because obviously Thomas Partey has been a pretty integral part of Arsenal's season this year. And I think throughout the season, everyone has just kind of assumed that he would be stood down at some point, and it's just never happened. And it's been a really bizarre part of Arsenal's otherwise very successful season. So I did want to throw that out there because it was quite a notable part of Colby's preseason sort of prediction or preview. Next up is
a spicy one, Tommie.
Yeah. Speaking of, this is spicy, but in a different way. Here's George talking up Chelsea's chances.
I think they'll just sneak into the top four, but they're going to have to sort out their forward line, I think, for that to happen. And, Thomas Tuchel's going to have a very good year rotating the squad and the wingers to produce the goals we need to keep pace with, the top few teams.
There you go, top four apparently. Not quite, but not a bad prediction, George.
Yeah, Thomas Tuchel did a really good job.
That's a
Surprised you
lot.
didn't go harder on them, George.
Yeah, I think you guys were discussing, it might have been just before we started, about how certain things you can't believe they're still from this season. And talking about Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea, it definitely fits within that bag, right?
Like won the Bundesliga, yeah. And then you had Frank Lampard coaching Chelsea, so you had a few.
Oh, jeez. What an absolute shit show. This one is a bad take from Colby this time around. Here you go, Colby.
Get back to where they were before their trajectory before last season, sort of just pushing for the European spots and really challenging, really just smashing that Everton Cup and having it be renamed the Leicester Cup. I think they'll finish in 7th, so I think they will bounce back and improve on last season.
Ooh. Oh, big yikes. Big
close.
Yikes there. Only 10 positions off. Oh wow, that it's probably a better clip than the than the Chelsea one, but geez.
Maybe I was damning them with faint praise, and it was all a ploy to get them nearly relegated.
Yeah. But I mean, even still, like with about 5 rounds to go, I kept thinking to myself, yeah, Leicester will be fine. Like they're going to stay up, aren't they? But just not the way it panned out.
No.
Here's me hijacking Damo's Brentford preview with getting on board with one of the Brentford players.
Keen Lewis Porter. So he scored 13 goals and 3 assists last year in sort of his breakout season in the Championship. He's only young, and there was a lot of clubs in the Premier League that were after him, but obviously Brentford could offer him more minutes really than anyone else probably. So some good ins.
Damo, just on the topic of Lewis Porter, I really rated him, and I know West Ham were close to signing him as well, but ended up chasing Lingard sort of just into the sunset. I'm going to go early, and I'm going to name him as one of my boys as well. So just throwing that out there.
Who?
Yeah, probably not my finest hour hijacking Damo's Brentford preview to then get on board with a bloke who ended up making 3 starts this season. So
this was real, like, I've picked him on Football Manager before and hope he comes good kind of areas.
It was real, like, I've been following West Ham Twitter too much. And everyone gassing up Keen Potter. Keen Potter, not Keen Porter as well. Like, we didn't even have his name right. And then finally, obviously he's not on the pod right now, but here's Damo with an absolute clanger as well, just to round things out.
Take a while to kick off, and I think fans was probably starting to get a little bit itchy a few games into the season. It takes everyone time to adapt to the Premier League, and we've seen it time and time again. No one really comes in and just starts banging goals.
So that was Damo talking about whether Erling Haaland will settle straight away into the Prem. So yeah, it was. I mean, it was pretty close. I mean, Erling Haaland didn't immediately take to the Premier League. I mean, it did take him all of half an hour before I think he'd opened his account for City, and then obviously he broke like the Premier League goal scoring record.
If you cast your mind back, Tommie, he had a really bad Community Shield though. So Damo was looking good for that one game.
And look, I was drinking that Haaland's going to take time to settle Kool-Aid as well. I didn't have him in my fantasy team game week 1 either, which, I mean, how wrong we turned out to be, right?
My big takeaway from all of that is, why was I some shadowy supervillain on a couch in those clips?
I missed the SBS thing. Where was that? Where did that go?
That's in storage in between moves. I've got a giant Federation Square World Cup 2006 flag for some reason. But yeah, that was a good backdrop.
What we haven't had enough of on both the Premier League and the A-League pod so far is the Speed World Cup song. World Cup.
Oh yeah.
World Cup. World Cup.
What a banger.
World Cup. I was going to actually include that in here, but I didn't want it like our pod to get taken down off of YouTube for like probably what's
Copyright
it called?
infringement.
Copyright infringement. Yeah. So that's as close as we're getting to Speed's World Cup song on the pod this time. So just thought I'd shoehorn that in. But that's Check the Tapes for this year. Obviously, a couple of bangers in there, or non-bangers if they were. But next up, we're going to do our team-by-team review. So we're going to start with each team's finish last season and how they fared this year, what event or team facet made their season or let them down. Any stats, facts, trivia as stray observations, a pass or fail from the squad, / manager, and also what to look out for over the off season. And just like the A-League pod, we're going to do this in reverse alphabetical order, which means I've got 4 of the next 6 teams. So looking forward to that. But look, here's me first up with Wolves. Wolves finished 10th last season. And a bit of a struggle was predicted. Things were starting to look a bit grim for them. But that was ultimately up until Bruno Lage got sacked. and Lopetegui was appointed, and things really turned around for them after that. Wolves haven't scored a lot of goals in the last couple of seasons, and that was made even worse by the injury to Raul Jimenez. That horrible head injury to him has really meant that their goals have really dried up pretty much ever since, and they haven't really resolved that problem. At the beginning of this season, they went 15 games, the first 15 games of this season, they scored just 5 goals. They scored 8 goals in the first 16 rounds. So really, really grim areas for Wolves. In terms of why that was, I think you can put that partially down to Pedro Neto's just absolute flop of a season. Everyone, if you remember, cast your minds back to game week 1 in FPL, everyone was predicting that he was going to absolutely blow up, but he just did not. He got no goals or assists in the first, I think it was the first month. And then he got injured in August, and then he hasn't played a full 90 minutes ever since he got injured all the way back in August. So I think that goes a long way towards explaining why this season turned out to be such a flop. In terms of pass or fail from the squad and manager, I think Bruno Lage's stint has got to be considered a failure. The team was destined to be relegated while he was at the helm. But then Lopetegui came in and really showed his skill in turning the team around. So I think Lopetegui does get a pass. But incredibly, though, due to FFP, Wolves may not be able to extend Lopetegui's contract, which is pretty bizarre considering Wolves have been in the Premier League now for I think 4 seasons or five seasons. So it'd be really disappointing if they have to let a really established coach like that disappear or move on. And they may also have to not only find a new manager but also replace Ruben Neves as well should he move on. Did see in the last 24 hours that João Moutinho is also moving on, so might have to find another, experienced Portuguese central midfielder to play alongside, possibly Ruben Neves or another player as well. That's Wolves. Pretty below average or below expectation season for them. Next up is me with West Ham. West Ham finished 7th last season, made the Europa League semi-finals, and so qualified for the Europa Conference League. This year, I expected, like many, West Ham would at least finish top half, but unfortunately, a bunch of new signings such as Naif Aguerd were either injured or struggled for form. And as a result, the team as a whole struggled whilst David Moyes tried to implement, a slightly different or an evolved style of play. David Moyes was under major pressure to keep his job over the Christmas New Year period. But they have subsequently stuck with David Moyes, and he's now, as I said before, made a European final on Thursday morning in the Conference League. Overall, they finished 14th, which meant that I think it was up until 3 games to go, they were a chance to still be relegated if things went against them. What let them down this year was a real lack of composure defensively, just making basic defensive errors, and then a lack of confidence going forward. And it also felt like players like Antonio and Bowen just were physically and mentally fatigued from a couple of really long seasons. Souček and Sufal were both badly out of form as well. One of the Dildo brothers, David Gold, he passed away in January, which marked a new period of instability for the club as a result of one of their owners dying. It meant that one of the new co-owners, Daniel Kretinsky, he could take over a larger part of the club, and it means that that's a big aspect of the club that may end up being changing over the off season. As we're recording, as I said, they're already into the European final this Thursday, and players like Aguerd and Paquetá have all started to find some form and are looking quite good. But unfortunately, Gianluca Scamacca has been injured or poorly utilised by David Moyes. Signs point to him being more of an Allaire than an Arnautovic. For the off-season, though, I guess the big question for West Ham is where is Declan Rice going to land? So will he end up at Arsenal or Man United, Newcastle, City or Bayern? But otherwise, I guess a bit of a mixed bag for West Ham. Good in Europe, poor in the league, though. Next up is going to be Damo, but Damo is going to be sending through his reviews, which means that then next up is going to be Southampton, reviewed by Mikey.
Yeah, so Southampton, I mean, of all the teams to get to, I get dead last year in the league. Southampton, 20th out of 20 last season, finishing 15th. And I know this podcast in particular has been talking for quite a while about Southampton circling the drain. And they've definitely gone down that drain now. I mean, I feel really bad for the fans of Southampton because, like, this is completely, I'd say, the fault of their club management and everything going around. They've had 3 managers throughout the season, which is absurd. It ends 11 years in the Premier League. And I know we said at the top of the podcast that we definitely have fans that only listen to the A-League reviews, and we have fans that only listen to the Premier League reviews. But it's not too long ago that Southampton were like the Premier League equivalent of the Mariners, bringing in all these talent, developing them, selling them off to bigger clubs. But now they're the Central Coast of a few years ago, and they're an absolute basket case. They started with Ralph Hasenhüttl, who has had them for the past few seasons, until November, where they got Nathan Jones to take over, until February, where they got Ruben Selles, until today. Yeah. So those are 3 very high-profile names there taking over Southampton. But I'd say again that the whole season comes down to internal club bullshit, which is it led to they had 6 wins in the entire season, 2 of them against Chelsea, which did seem like a bigger deal at the time, I suppose, but maybe it wasn't as big of a scalp as they thought it was at the time. I just really think the next season is going to be very important for Southampton, whether they can be one of those clubs that bounce back into the Premier League or if this is a more kind of fractured club. Because they're not going to be able to, they're going to have to offload a lot of players, and I don't know if parachute payments will help them. This is literally statistically their worst ever top flight season on record.
Oof.
So Southampton, not a good one. Yeah.
Be a good club for Ange to manage.
Oh yeah, there you go. I mean, you can't do any worse. It's a low benchmark. Player of the season. The only thing I'd say there is James Ward-Prowse. He's been there since he was a child, literally a child. He started all 38 games, providing 9 goals and 4 assists. So that's what you get at Southampton at the top end. So
I think
sorry,
he was
Southampton fans. Yeah.
I think he was their top scorer last year as well, which is just terrible,
Yeah.
right? Like, and as Jesse says, they've been circling the drain for years. So the fact that they've finally gone down, he must be very pleased about. Also, just
But he didn't pick them to go down this season. I raised that with him in the group chat. It was like the only season he hasn't actually tipped them to go down.
That's what they were waiting for.
Yeah.
All right, next up is Forest with me. So Forest finished 4th in the championship, then won the playoff final last year. It's their first year back in the Premier League for 20 years. So it was always going to be a pretty wild ride. And boy, oh boy, we were not let down. I feel like Forest's season can be defined by people saying in either October or March, hey, when did that guy sign for Forest? I was not tracking that, and with genuine surprise. I think I did that with John Joe Shelby, Andre Ayew, and at least 3 other players throughout the season. Forest ended up finishing 16th, and I think you can make a pretty decent case that they deserve to stay up. What event or facet made up made their season. I think it was, even though they signed a ridiculous amount of players, I think it was 32 players at last count that they signed throughout this season. It may have grown since I last did my research in the last few days. I don't know, but it was homegrown. Brennan Johnson. And a bloke who was in the championship last year, Morgan Gibbs-White, who were their clear standout players. Breakout seasons for both players in the Premier League. But their form was very streaky. The first 5 Premier League games in the new year resulted in a 5-match unbeaten run, including wins over Southampton, Leicester, and Leeds. And they had another burst of 3 wins in 5 at the back end of the season to ensure safety. But outside of those sort of 2 5-game runs was pretty grim at times. Pass or fail from the manager. I thought Steve Cooper, who we almost unanimously agreed was the ugliest man in the Premier League on our preview episode, has done an incredible job at keeping everyone moving in the same direction in this squad, and getting a decent tune to have a pretty ragtag bunch of players. The eccentric Greek owners have even given him a contract extension when people what was it around? I think it was sort of September, October sort of time frame were talking about him getting sacked. So, yeah, just more wild times at Forest. What to look out for over the off-season, they're going to have to sell to buy, and there's no shortage of players who they can sell, given that the squad is super bloated. And that's probably the biggest problem, is they probably need to sell somewhere between 10 and 15 players if they're hoping to bring in some others. I saw that they made Chris Wood's deal permanent. So just a really wild ride for Forest. But I'm pleased that they did stay up, because it was always going to be a crazy season for them with the huge turnover of players. And I think Steve Cooper's done a pretty bloody good job to keep him up. Next up is Newcastle. Also me reviewing them. I think I'm getting all of my reviews out of the way, and then I'm just going to be a passenger for the rest of the pod. Last year they finished 11th, as someone said earlier on. And so I thought a top half finish would be most likely. Maybe sneak into Europe in sort of 7th or 8th place or something like that if they're having a really exceptional season. But this season has been incredible for Newcastle. Eddie Howe's done an incredible job and turned this squad with a couple of pretty notable additions in Sven Botman and Bruno Guimaraes into a Champions League team, which is just pretty wild, really. And they ended up finishing 4th. What really, we talk about how Newcastle were quite good going forward, and everyone talks about Isaac and Callum Wilson, but really it was their defence that's really set them apart this season. They had the equal best defence, incredibly stingy all season. So that really has been the baseline for their success and their qualification for the Champions League. They were fantastic going forward, and that's what a lot of people will remember them for. They beat Brighton 4-1. They beat Spurs 6-1. They beat West Ham 5-1, 4-0 against Villa. They were all examples of how they just absolutely blew some teams away. I mentioned about the job that Eddie Howe had done, and I think that was probably no more exemplified by the fact that he managed to turn Mickey Almiron into like the second coming of Messi or something like that for about half the season. He did sort of drop off towards the back end of the season, but Almiron was seriously good for about sort of 2,000 games in the middle of the season. Obviously a massive pass for Eddie Howe and this squad. I guess the biggest problem now is that this is now the expectation for this team and this squad moving forward. They're going to have to now sign better players, manage bigger egos, and managing that squad is going to become even more difficult. And especially since I think that they've probably achieved Champions League qualification probably a season early, or earlier than that they were expecting. So this is going to be really, really challenging, I think, for them moving forward. What's to look out for over the off-season? Well, look, we know that Newcastle are the richest club in the world, so we know that they're going to be spending more money on new signings, but are they going to are they going to spend another 150 million? How much is this squad actually going to get overhauled? Are they going to look to bring in sort of 2 or 3 major signings per window now for the next 2 or 3 windows, or how is this actually going to progress? So it's going to be very interesting. Also, I want to throw out there, I wonder if they're a dark horse, to sign Declan Rice as well. I actually think Bruno Guimaraes and Declan Rice would be an awesome midfield duo, like plenty of dynamism and quality on the ball there. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not a terrible shout, I think.
Bruno Guimaraes.
Yeah. But that's Newcastle, obviously. Great season for them. Next up is going to be Mikey doing Manchester United.
Yeah, well, Manchester United is a bit of an interesting one. I can't really get a gauge on if the fans are happy or not at the moment. Obviously not after last night, facing in the FA Cup final, crosstown rivals Manchester City. But it was a good result. It was last season, Man United finished up in 6th place, and now they're 3rd. And I think that's very admirable. They were definitely the best of the rest coming into the end of the season there. Arsenal and Man City at the moment just seemed a bit of a insurmountable kind of opponent to have to try to catch up to. But I think Man United have really put in all the right. Next season, I think they'll be placed to properly start to challenge for the Premier League title again. I think Man United fans have been disappointed in individuals, but not necessarily Erik ten Hag and the way he's playing. I think there's been a lot of negativity around Harry Maguire, De Gea at certain points. But as a whole, I think they're really building to something. They won the League Cup. That's the first piece of silverware at Old Trafford since the Jose Mourinho era, which seems like a lifetime ago now. But it's really been an up and down season. Like I said, they finished the season winning like 8 out of 11 games. But this season also featured like 7-0 losses to Liverpool, 6-3 defeats to Manchester City. Like, those aren't just run-of-the-mill results. Those were seriously questionable results. But to finish 3rd in a season where you lose 7-0 and 6-1, I think that's pretty commendable. So there was also a big clear-out at the start of the season. I mean, it's not too long ago we were talking about Ten Hag and what's he going to do with Ronaldo. And again, that seems like a lifetime ago. I don't know if we talked about it in the last podcast with the A-League, but this season in particular, I don't know if it is this World Cup break, but everything seems like so long ago, different lifetimes ago. But Manchester United, they've got the Champions League next season, and I expect Man United to properly challenge again. Knocked out in the Europa League in the round of 16, and fell into a bit of a slump. But like I say, to finish 3rd, I think that's an accomplishment for Man United and where they were at the start of the season.
I think at the beginning of the season, we said that like this Man United side would qualify for the Champions League if they got rid of Ronaldo. And I think I'm pleased to see that that's sort of turned out to be true, and that we were kind of on the money about how just poisonous and toxic Ronaldo was to decide. It speaks, I think, it shines a really positive light, I think, on Ten Hag and his authority and just the way he's going about his business at Man United.
I think it was the same case when he was at Juventus as well. It's one of those, I don't know what the particular problem is. Like, it's almost like he's so good you can't play him, but you've got nowhere to really play him. And if you want to implement a certain style, you just can't kind of have him. So I think he's done very well. It's a bold move to kind of lock out. We also lost Paul Pogba, Cristiano Ronaldo. Like, these are big names to move on from a club. At price tags that probably eye-watering to bring them in the first place. So yeah, I fully back Erik ten Hag to go on to bigger and better things next season.
The real challenge for them is going to be whether or not they can, I guess, go that extra step further, right? It's one thing finishing in the top 4, 20 points off of City, but can you bridge that gap of 20 points and make it 15 or even...
a lot of that, I think, is going to come down to if this ownership does change from the Glazers, or or if there's a Qatari
Mm.
ownership of Manchester United, or I don't know what's going to happen there. But yeah, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts. Does anyone know any news about the sale? I haven't seen anything in quite a while.
What are they at, round 5, or what is it? The longest sale process known to man.
It's ridiculous.
Well, the next team is reviewing is also me, and it's the other team from Manchester, and that is Manchester City, who are just hot off the press, the FA Cup champions. I don't know if anyone watched that last night. I watched it very bleary-eyed. I managed to get through it, but you didn't have to wait long. 12 seconds for the first goal there. And, I mean, if you're going to concede in the first 12 seconds, I don't think it matters what you're going to do after the rest of the game there. I think that was already won and done.
I watched the first 12 seconds, then went, fuck this, I'm going to bed.
Yeah, well, so Manchester City, they are the champions again. It's a back-to-back-to-back, much like their compatriots down in Melbourne. Had another remarkable season. They spent 248 days at the top before faltering. And they clinched the Premier League title with 28 wins in 38 matches. Now, I mean, I think a lot of us thought Arsenal might have somehow clinched it, but it was always that old reliable, we know Manchester City's coming. We know they're too consistent to drop this. And as boring as it is, here they are again, champions again. In the Champions League, that's still to be played. They've got Inter Milan. I'm not sure if there will be an upset there. I hope there is, but I very much doubt it. In the transfers for this season, I thought it was quite interesting that they let Gabby Jesus, Raheem Sterling, and Zinchenko leave, not just to anyone, but to direct league rivals. And I think that kind of tells more about their confidence in their own ability to walk the league again, because I mean, those players were key players in those teams directly challenging Manchester City. And I don't know. It never really was a thing before, selling to teams. If, teams with money selling to other teams with money in the same league, I don't think it normally happens. So I thought that was quite interesting. But to bring in Julian Alvarez from River Plate, Calvin Phillips from Leeds, Erling Haaland from Dortmund. I mean, we've already talked enough about Haaland, player of the season for me. That's hardly controversial. That's not going to be any check the tapes. That is just stonewall. Erling Haaland is the difference between Manchester City shithousing the league and Manchester City winning the Champions League, which has always been a little thing dangled in front of them. They've never quite been able to reach. And I think Haaland is definitely the difference between winning the league and winning the Champions League. So next season, I think Manchester City will aim again to maintain their dominance over English football. And I think they would be wanting to do that as the European champions, looking to get a second star above their badge.
Yeah, just another pretty immense season from City this season. Obviously, they were everyone thought that they were going to go very well, and then we weren't sure how Haaland was going to go, but everyone was pretty confident that City was still going to be just imperious. And yeah, they just turned it on, like you said. I can't remember the exact stat, Mikey, but just that last 20 odd games undefeated, just. You sense that it's like in the Terminator when the Terminator's running after the car with the golf clubs, right? It's just you know he's coming. You can't do anything about it. Like you can run, but it's not going to matter. They're still going to chase you down.
I think you'll find that's Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Tommie.
Now I have Jesse down is doing the Liverpool review, and I don't think anyone has done the prep for that, so I might have to add that into the into the audio pod that I'm going to update. So we're going to be skipping Liverpool for now.
We'll be sending Jesse a
But
strongly
that
worded
makes-
email.
Is there an echo in the house? I'm hearing two Tommies.
There is. I think it's you, George. It means that you're up next, Colby, with Leicester.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. A bit of editing for you to do, Tommy. That's it's never hurt anyone. We'll put Jesse in post. Yeah, Leicester. Oh, look, I get to atone for my terrible takes now. After finishing 8th last season, 18th and relegated. What made their season or let them down? I mean, there was a lot of things, and there's been a lot spoken about this because it was a bit of a shock, although it was a slow car crash. I saw one of those TIFO videos that was breaking it down, but made the good point that COVID actually sort of kicked off this snowball for Leicester, given that the King Power were a travel shop basically. So, and they took a huge hit in COVID, as a lot of travel businesses did. And then obviously the wheels had been wobbling for him for a while, and sort of the way that he left the club partway through the season didn't really leave the team in good shape. Poor signings coming in, that didn't really work out, coupled with the defensive crisis that they had. And then the guys that they brought, you've got your Soyuncu's who got injured, and then Fofana, who they let go, and then replace that with Amoretti and Vestergaard and Johnny Evans. It just wasn't the same. Obviously, big Harry Souttar, just came in too late to save them, as he definitely would have if he was there earlier. And then letting Schmeichel go on basically the eve before the season started and replacing him with Danny Ward, it just wasn't up to it. So all of that was, sort of snowballed and meant that, that saw Leicester go down. So pass fail from the squad. I mean, definitely a fail from the squad, given that, the names that are still in the squad, despite the defensive injuries and a couple of signings that missed the mark. So yeah, you'd have to say that's a fail from the squad, and a fail from the manager in terms of how Rodgers left them, and then bringing in Dean Smith. What an admission of defeat! If I've ever seen one. There's enough time to turn the season around, and you're bringing in this championship manager, who's it's like they knew the writing was on the wall. What to look out for next season? Big old fire sale in the off season. We've got Madison, Barnes, Iheanacho, Daka. Maybe Vardy, although not sure what his resale value would be at this stage. But Ndidi, Castagna, they've got a lot of value there that they can that they're going to need to offload. So I think that's the next thing we can look out for. But they do have a lot of young talent still on their books. So I think they might be one of those clubs that can bounce back if they sort of get the squad balance right and get a decent manager in. I mean, Dean Smith's a good championship manager. We know he's got credentials there. So I think that Leicester could be one that could do well in the championship next season.
Yeah, don't forget, you heard it first on our A-League pod, that Jamie Vardy could be headed to Central Coast.
What a vibe that would be, though.
Make it happen.
I don't know about the nightlife on the
fantastic.
coast. Might be left wandering.
You sense
there.
that Jamie Vardy and the Cum Dog, it might be cut from a similar cloth, right? What about Rebecca Vardy? How do you reckon she'd fit in on the coast?
Good Lord. The Real Housewives of Gosford.
Can't wait.
All right, boys. I'm up next with Leeds, though. So Leeds finished 17th last year and just missed out on relegation. A bit like Southampton, they were circling the drain and caught up with them this year. They finished 19th and they're relegated to the Championship. So look, in doing my prep for the pod and learning a little bit more, or going through Leeds' season in a bit more detail, I feel like the best way to summarize Leeds' season, or the past 18 months for Leeds, is that they've gone from Marcelo Bielsa to Sam Allardyce in 18 months. It's just a really absurd situation. I don't know how you do that mentally, or even just from a stylistic sense of your style of play. But I feel like that sums it up really well. A couple of specific examples, though, of just how poorly the club has been managed. They spent $35 million on Jorginho Rutter in the January transfer window. He played the equivalent of 3 matches since being signed, and he's a striker, so they were short on goals, but just like someone has not done their due diligence on that guy before he was signed. Not sure you could also say that some of the guys that were brought in by Jesse Marsh, such as like Brendan Aronson, have been a success. Rasmussen has done an okay job at right back, but I don't think any of the guys who were signed with the Phillips and Rafinha money, I think, have really been a success, or at least been
Tommie,
difference makers.
This is why
Yep.
I'm scared about Ange coming to the Premier League, because, like you've got Jesse Marsh at Leeds and he brings in all these Americans, and it's sort of like almost make or break for the country in a way. And now everyone's like, oh yeah, we knew Americans were shit and Ted Lasso sucks and all this kind of stuff. And like, well, what if Ange comes in and brings, I don't know, Geordie Boss and whoever else to Spurs, and then
Aaron Moy.
Aaron Moy, and then Spurs do really badly, and everyone's like, "Yes, you Australians suck. I hate neighbours." Like, it's not going to be good.
If that happens, we're just back to where we currently are anyway. So I reckon
Yeah,
it's
true,
over.
true.
We've got really
No
nothing
big
to
loss.
lose. We've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Get Matty Ryan in there to replace Lloris.
Lloris, yeah.
An improvement.
Yeah. But look, you could make a pretty strong case, I think, that Leeds' season peaked in game week 3 after they beat Chelsea 3-0. That took them to 3rd in the table. But yeah, it was all downhill from there. They had the league's worst defence. They got 2 points from their final 8 games. They conceded 29 goals in that 8-game stretch at an average of 3.6 goals per game, which blows my mind how you can be that bad over basically the end of the season. It really just shows that like they'd given up. Like they were relegated then in hindsight. In terms of pass or fail from the squad, well, look, I don't think there's anyone really that comes out of this looking positive. It's a failure from the squad, from the manager, from the ownership, just everywhere. Like the fact that there's no standout player from this squad where you go, oh, he'll easily go on to like another club. There's no player that stands out as someone who's too good for the championship, which is unusual, right? Like normally there's one standout player that emerges with their reputation intact, but I don't really see it with this squad. And yeah, so geez, where Leeds go from here over the off season, I'm not really sure. Like they're going to need to sign a new manager. Obviously, the Sam Allardyce experiment hasn't worked out. It sounds like a band name or something. The Sam Allardyce experiment.
No,
the Sam Allardyce
grand,
hasn't. Yeah, exactly right. Like for what, conceding 6 goals, no wins. I think he got 1 point or something, and they were relegated. So just another complete disaster there, really. But yeah, like I don't know if they're going to see like a bit of a fire sale. I think Aronson does have a sell-on clause. I could see him being just squad fodder at basically a mid-table or lower mid-table team like a Palace or something like that. But I don't really see him as someone that's going to like even go to even Brighton. I think probably the likes of Brighton would go, yeah, pass. So I don't know. It's just a really grim time, I think, for Leeds, and I don't necessarily see them bouncing straight back up either.
Yeah, I certainly
sounds.
hope they're not lost to the league again, because I don't know particularly why, but I just feel it was nice to kind of have them back in the Premier League, and it seemed like they were just a big club back in a big league. And yeah, you're right. I don't know if they will bounce immediately back, but I hope they're not gone for as long as they were last time.
Yeah, you think the manager choice on this one? Yeah.
Really important. I think, George, we're about to make the same point, right? That, like this next manager, if they don't get that right and they don't come back up immediately, I don't know how long it's going to be before they're back up, because once those parachute payments stop kicking in, then things get ugly pretty quickly financially for a lot of these sorts of teams. And that's Leeds. So next up is going to be Damo with Fulham. And then now we're after Damo, we're going to be moving into Everton with Colby.
All right, Everton. So we said in the season preview that having avoided relegation the season before, what would be the goal for this season would be, well, look, not to get in another relegation battle. So what does Everton go and do? They go and get themselves into a worse relegation battle. And it came down to that final day against Bournemouth, where they just had to win at Goodison Park against Bournemouth, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but they did it. So, and they managed to avoid relegation, kept that perfect record of staying in the top flight. What let them down or made their season? I would say Lampard / Deitch. Lampard let them down, and Deitch somehow taught them how to, like Deitch would have just got in there and just been like, boys, you can draw games instead of losing them. And they're like, oh, okay. So
He's a genius.
That's literally all he would have done. And I mean, it goes to show too that the highest rated players on SofaScore and other ratings websites at the end of the season were Tarkowski and Dwight McNeil, Sean Dyche players. So it says it all, really. So, I mean, squad, you'd still have to give a fail to. I think, and I said this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about who could go down, and can't believe Everton are in this conversation. They've got the England goalkeeper, Doucouré. I know Calvert-Lewin was, is injured a lot of the season, so that's, that probably adds to it. But they've got all these players that were, Connor Cody, Tarkowski, Yeremina, like, the list goes on. Like these guys are solid mid-table Premier League players. So too talented to be in that position. So it's definitely a fail from their perspective for letting their club get there. Manager, again, Lampard, clear fail. Like that guy is just not long for top flight jobs. I think he's well and truly been figured out at this point. And you have to give Dyche a pass. He came in to help them avoid relegation, and he did the job. So that's definitely a pass on that metric. What to look out for next season? Big rethink over the off season. Seems, I guess they're going to stick with Dyche. I don't know. I don't have any further information. I could be not surprised if he gets replaced, but I could also not be surprised if they go, okay, well, you've done the job. Here it is, and give him some signings in an off season and a preseason to see what he can do. But whatever the case is, like the club needs a lot of work. That midfield needs reshaping. They probably need, some more forwards. It's a shame that Calvert-Lewin hasn't been, he might come good in terms of his injuries, but they certainly need some backup. And there's a bit of work to do there.
I think I said it last podcast, but is it possible that Frank Lampard could be the worst manager twice in one season?
I think it's highly possible, because I think we've seen it.
Yeah, I saw someone saying that he's done an incredible job to somehow get two clubs relegated in the same season almost. All right, thanks, Colby. Next up is Damo talking Fulham. And then followed by that is going to be, Damo talking Crystal Palace, actually. And instead it's going to be George talking Chelsea.
Speaking of Lampard.
Yeah, perfect segue. I think we've talked a little bit about Chelsea, but it's been one of the strangest / funniest seasons you would have witnessed. So taking it back to where they finished the season prior at 4th position, some structural issues there, but Thomas Tuchel building on the squad. It looked like he had some encouraging signings coming through: Raheem Sterling, Koulibaly, Cucurella. So then pretty much from day one, something was a bit off. You could tell there was an issue with the owners and Bowley and the squad, and from then it was basically a total disaster. Tuchel was sacked and replaced by Graham Potter, who was then sacked and replaced by Frank Lampard. Chelsea were in a relegation dogfight. Some of the worst football I've ever seen. £600 million was basically spent by Bowley and Clearlake coming into the club. Bloated squad, players who didn't want to be there, no rhythm, no good vibes. Lampard was brought in to basically help Chelsea
get the vibes back.
Get the vibes back. Get through in the Champions League. Yeah.
Is it like how do you feel as a Chelsea? Just to labour this point, like, but how do you feel, and how do you think other Chelsea fans feel? Like, seeing your heroes, like seeing your Frank Lampard's just absolutely take a steaming dump on their legacy. I mean, or does it, like, do you separate their sort of player legacy from their managerial legacy? Does that sort of stand alone? Because I know for me personally, like with Robbie Fowler, just finding out what a reprehensible human he was when he managed the Roar in the A-League. And I thought, oh, great, a Liverpool legend coming to manage my team in the A-League. How good. And then he just turned out to be a complete and utter, like, piece of shit. And, I was pretty disappointed.
Well, Colby, no one's ever said Frank Lampard's a bad bloke. So let's start from there. But as a manager, I think I don't think anyone could have managed this team and done a good job. So I think that the situation was that much of a shambles that, he was on a hiding to nothing. And if he took this job to enhance his reputation or brand or get a better job afterwards, he should have given it a little bit more thought, because I think from the minute he walked in there, he realized he was basically fucked. And so was the team.
Well, and Todd Bowley was giving team talks, wasn't he?
Yeah, the Todd father. He's just splashing the cash and picking the team. So,
with hindsight, I don't think this is all on Lampard, right? Like, we all know that, we all knew from his time both at Everton and the first time he was at Chelsea that Lampard was a guy of limited managerial talent, right? Like at the elite level, right? So to send him back there to fix up like a steaming turd of a situation, what did you expect? So I don't know. I think
they were just bored of calling up hitting to take over the caretaker role.
Yeah, where was Bruce this time? What was going on? Oh, because
is he still alive, or is he?
Yeah, I think so just to sort of to tie it back, 12th position, solid 12th, top 12. Probably a major fail, for pretty much all the signings that came through. Fofana was injured quite a lot, showed some promise. Mudryk was sort of out of his depth, coming over from Ukraine halfway through the season. Yeah, Enzo Fernandez, as I said, potentially player of the year. Cucurella, I've never seen someone play worse in a Chelsea shirt for that price as well. There's probably another 100 transfers we can look at, but I think there's going to be a lot of changes at Chelsea this off-season. Pochettino coming in can only be positive. The squad is extremely bloated, so there's 35 odd players there, plus the guys coming back from loan. So they're going to have a lot of work sort of cutting that squad. The big one who's probably leaving is Mason Mount, which is really sad, Chelsea through and through. But doesn't look like he's able to sort of square away a contract or a new contract with the club. So, and Manchester United are sniffing around. So it's going to be a completely new look Chelsea side coming into the next season with a new manager, a proper manager. And I for one am just going to park this season, dump it in the bin. So's Graham Potter, so's Thomas Tuchel, so's Frank Lampard, so's all the Chelsea supporters, and look forward to a new era with Poch, hopefully.
I think the worst thing coming out of this season is that everyone is like, oh yeah, so they need to dump like a bunch of players and sort of sort out the squad, sort of make up. But the problem is, like, because Todd the disruptor is too clever and has outsmarted all of the financial fair play and the like. How is he going to shift these guys on 8-year contracts?
Yeah, well, look, the signings. Yeah, well,
Go
the
on, mate.
signing strategy was to sign young players and stretch their contracts out on the 8-year type deals. But the thing with Chelsea is they haven't made Champions League, so they've lost a massive revenue source. The thing that they're going to do to balance the books is to sell the young homegrown players, because you make a massive windfall on anyone who's homegrown that you've developed. So Mason Mount, Loftus-Cheek, maybe Conor Gallagher, those
Levi.
sorts of guys. Yeah.
Who's
Those
the defender?
sorts of-
Levi Colwell, I think it is.
Colwell is at Brighton. They've offered £30 million
Yeah.
for him. I think Chelsea will keep him and bring him back. But those are the sort of sales that have to be actioned in order for Chelsea to be able to balance the books
A
effectively.
young fella named Aubameyang.
Yeah, young striker had a massive impact.
What's
well.
Lukaku doing, George? Get him back.
Well, yeah, at the moment he's coming back, but I don't think he'll hang around
Under
as well.
protest.
That is
Under protest,
crazy.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Hopefully he wins the Champions League. Scores the winner and just pumps up his
Pumps up his
price.
value, yeah.
Yeah. You got to think.
Real, like-
got to think in dollars and cents now.
It'd be real like Barcelona and Coutinho like areas if Lukaku did that right.
Have they ever paid that fee?
Grim.
Let's move swiftly on.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, mate, it's up to you again. You got Brighton.
Yep. So I think Brighton and Chelsea this season are inextricably linked, I suppose. And so Brighton have been on an upward trajectory basically for the last few seasons. Firstly, finishing 13th, 9th, and this season 6th. So making Europe, and it was all built on Graham Potter's start, winning 4 out of 6, and then moving to Chelsea. As I said earlier, this happened all in the international break, and also where the Premier League was sort of stopped for the passing of the Queen. And Brighton's amazing scouting department, amazing well-resourced research department already had De Zerbi there and waiting. Bringing him in, his first game, I think they drew with Liverpool, I believe, 3-3. And then basically were in a really, really good position after that. He managed to get his system in place and managed to sort of improve their football playing and culture, and added some goals, which was always the knock on Brighton. And I think his first win was that 4-1 win against Chelsea. You had Mitoma, Undav, Estupiñán, all these guys that no one had heard of. Solly March, just guys that had sort of been petering, or people who didn't know much about them, and then coming in and playing really well in De Zerbi's system. And then you had all of that spearheaded by Alexis McAllister as well, and Moises Caicedo, who had decent World Cups, and De Zerbi building on that solid foundation. And I think the one thing with Brighton this season we can all attest to is the goals. They became a team who flattered to deceive. Had a great possession and chances, who weren't able to score. To your Danny Welbeck scoring goals for fun. So, and Tommie's man Undav coming in late in the season and scoring a few and looking pretty good. But yeah, a lot of positives for Brighton. And De Zerbi's not. I don't think De Zerbi's going anywhere in the short term, because he's going to build on what they've done this year. As I said, they came 6th, so that they've qualified for Europe. The thing that Brighton have to do, and as they do every year, is manage their outgoings with bringing people in of equal quality. So it looks like McAllister's probably going to Liverpool. 1 or 2 others may be going. Caicedo, Arsenal were after him at the January transfer deadline, so that might be one they might also have to replace. But and Levi Cole will probably head back to Chelsea. So their amazing scouting department's going to have to do a bit of work and get those holes plugged. But with the way they've been going, the way that club is run, I don't doubt for a second that they can't. Whether they can manage the Premier League commitments with the European commitments, as we've seen with a lot of teams on a smaller budget with a smaller squad. That's going to be the challenge for De Zerbi, but the sky's the limit for them, and if they can sort of build out the edges of their squad and keep their energy and an attacking verve going, then I think they'll do well on all fronts.
Plenty of exciting young talent there, George.
Yeah. I think Estupiñán's probably my favourite. He basically came out of nowhere. Another sort of South American young player, but the way they flipped their players and bring in guys who are talented and I think the other one I think I mentioned briefly was Mitoma, the Japanese forward. So he's not long for Brighton, I think, but if they can get another season out of him, he's only going to improve as well.
Who apparently Ange tried to sign at Celtic, but Brighton, I mean, can't really compete with the Premier League. Even Celtic can't compete with them financially and just playing in one of the biggest leagues in the world.
Are you implying that that there's a Spurs bid coming, Tommie?
Well, stranger things
It's
have
over
happened.
to Spurs. Lock it in.
Heard it here first.
All right, very good. Thanks, George. Next up is Damo covering Brentford, and then we're back to George with Bournemouth.
Excellent. Bournemouth had a strange season. I think coming up from the Championship, they managed to, much to a lot of people's, a lot of tipsters' regret, really, finished 15th, 5 points clear. But they were completely written off by all the pundits and myself
Including many
personally.
on this pod.
Yeah, many on this pod. So even they were written off even by Scott Parker, actually. So I think after a certain loss, Parker said, the team's ill-equipped for the top flight. I think that was, and they brought Gary O'Neill in, and that was, I think, after the 9-0 loss to, was it Liverpool, if I remember correctly? But
7. So no, it was 9-9. Yeah.
It was 9. So 9-0 loss to Liverpool. Scotty Parker sacked, missed his fancy sweaters. But they brought in Gary O'Neill, who was, not a popular choice as manager, and everyone thought he would be a temporary manager, and basically managed to rattle off 7 from 12, won 7 from 12 from the 18th of February to the 30th of April. So managing, as I said, to stay up 5 points clear. And a lot of people had some serious doubts about whether O'Neill could manage, whether Bournemouth, could stay up with their squad. They didn't invest a lot over summer.
I'm still looking at their squad, George, going, how the hell did these guys stay up?
Does anyone know their top scorer for the season?
Oh, Billing?
Philip Billing with 7 goals. So
yeah, that's wild.
Top billing.
Yeah, top billing. So I think they've done extremely well with what they've got. They've managed to hang on because I think a lot of teams somehow managed to be worse than them despite their squads. But, it's something for Gary O'Neill to build on. They're going to need to invest this season because I don't think they can stay up with the squad they've currently got. And I think they've lost Jefferson Lerma as well, who's, one of their better players in midfield. But, 4 game safety with 4 games to spare with basically no spending in summer and a sacking of a coach as well is something to build on because if they've managed to stay up this season, a bit of stability and a bit of spending should give them a solid platform going forward. Will they survive?
Pretty incredible
next
effort.
year? Yeah. Will they survive next year? I don't know. It will come down to investment, I think, because you've got a lot of teams coming up and a lot of teams who've had a really bad season. going to invest quite a lot. So it's just a matter of whether they can hang on or whether, it'll be, them and Luton, not spending too much and trying to sort of sneak through again by staying up. But, a lot of positives. Gary O'Neill has shown he can manage. So as I said, I think it's just a matter of, their squad building on this season and filling in those gaps that they've got, building out a bigger squad and finding some goals, because, you need your Dom Solanke types to score a little bit more than if Philip Billings your leading scorer, then it's, probably a bit of a red flag.
Oh yeah, pretty. Like it's really during these types of situations, George, where you're looking back on like Bournemouth season, for example, and you go, like you said, I think it might have been Colby that said it actually. How did this team stay up? Like you're still a little bit incredulous as to how it's actually happened, but alas, here we are. Next up is going to be Colby with Aston Villa, and then he'll close it out as well with Arsenal.
Home stretch, Aston Villa. So, I mean, we touched on this a little bit at the start, but yeah, season of two halves, much like this season in football, given the World Cup break, sort of split the Premier League and the A-League and all of the other leagues' seasons. So it was with Aston Villa, who finished in 14th the season before. We're looking a bit dire under Gerrard, and then the management of the club just switched into gear and immediately swooped on Unai Emery, who came in after Gerrard had gone a bit stale. And like I said earlier on, if the season had kept going, I think Villa would have been pushing for the European spots. But as it was, they finished in 7th, which was an incredible achievement. So, I mean, resounding pass from the squad. And after Unai Emery came in, the job he did, with players like Ramsey, brought Mings back from the wilderness, Douglas Luiz flourished under him, Watkins went berserk. So, huge resounding pass from Unai Emery as well. And, I think, Tommie, you were saying, if he played the whole season, he would certainly be in the conversation for manager of the season. So, yeah, absolutely great work from Unai Emery and my boy Emmy B, him and his Bundas. They just, they just kept on going, and that was thanks to Unai Emery as well. Sort of, making that decision to sort of bring him in. Didn't really like the look of Coutinho, and got Emmy B in there instead. So yeah, fantastic. I'd be really interested to see what he can do with a full preseason, if that's what he could do with not much notice and halfway through the season. So I think they've got an exciting off season ahead as they sort of look forward to being in Europe next year and just sort of getting the squad in the shape that Emery wants it. And then on to Arsenal, I guess, to close us out. It's pushing City. I think I'm not going to say the B words. A lot of people did. I think that's very unfair to Arsenal, given the juggernaut that City are. They finished in 2nd after finishing in 5th. We all sort of predicted them to stay about that 5th and be pushing the European spots. So I think they outperformed. Gabby Jesus, we mentioned him. I think he was the thing that really he was the missing piece in that squad. That energetic centre forward that Gabby Jesus at least thought he could be, and so he was at the start of the season before that injury.
Backed himself.
He backed himself, and he did really well. And just the young players that, like, the other thing that really made it is that those other young guys that had already been there for a couple of seasons, that just all clicked and they are all just developing at the same time. Ødegaard, Saka, Martinelli all had 20 plus goal involvements over the course of the season. So they were just, what a force. And then combine that with Gabby Jesus when fit. Really, really good front line. And then you throw into the mix Saliba. I think he was their injury, wasn't he? Their important defensive injury.
Yeah, because then it was Rob Holding.
Yeah, so and that's the difference. That's it. Once you take him out and you put Rob Holding in, that's what I really think led to some of the wobbles that cost them the season. And I mean, maybe that and a bit of inexperience throughout the squad. It's a young squad. And you've got players in there who aren't used to sort of winning leagues like City's players now are. So I think that's what was the difference between the two in the end. But obviously, still give the players a pass. Those players I mentioned just before. But the injuries caused a few problems, but definitely a pass to those guys, and they're only going to get better. This team's only going to get better. Just need a bit of depth now over the off season, and I think people are now respecting Arteta, which I think you said before, Tommie, as well. Like people were, there was a lot of Arteta out a couple of seasons ago, particularly from the Arsenal fans as well. But I think everyone, he's sort of, this is his season where he's really sort of given himself some credit with not only the fan base, but everyone else sort of respects what he's all about now. But the next challenge, obviously, is after that late disappointment, is to just rev the boys back up, refresh the squad, add a bit of depth, maybe Declan Rice, to maintain the competition and just take them to the next level.
Yeah, agreed. Very good season.
Yeah, I think you talked about they need some squad depth now, I guess, for next season. They've kind of already started to make good progress in that area with Trossard and Jorginho coming in. So already they're kind of on the path towards both juggling Champions League and trying to, qualify for Champions League again and make another title charge kind of thing. But I guess the challenge is, how do you either make the first 11 stronger or improve your squad depth without, while still keeping everyone happy? So
that's a real challenge. Yeah, that's the challenge for Arteta. Yeah, and to get past the disappointment, because obviously they threw everything at the league and fell short. Just as Liverpool did when they got over 100 points and still lost to City, and there have been other teams that have been in that position before. But that's where the manager's really going to earn his money to sort of motivate the players and manage the players that he's got and the ones that he's going to bring in. So there's a lot going to be at play there.
Yeah, it's they're another one that's going to be really interesting to see, what they do over the next sort of 2 to 3 months during the off season, to see who they bring in, who they also move on, because there's no guarantee that all those players there are going to stay either. So very interesting times ahead. But yeah, look, that wraps us up for the team by team reviews. But there is one more thing that we do need to cover, and that's got to give away some FPL prizes. So look, I've got to give away a couple of monthly prizes first of all before we get into the overall prizes. The prize values are $30 cash, which was the kitty that everyone built up at the beginning of the season. So the April winner was the same as March. That was Mace Caruana. So congratulations, Mace. You'll be pleased that not only did Everton stay up, but also that you've won a couple of FPL prizes. So congratulations there, Mace. For our May winner, though, it's a new one. I don't think he's actually won a monthly award so far this season, and it's Vasily Souvalis. Excuse pronunciation. Hopefully I've got that right there, mate. But congratulations on taking out the May award. But yeah, now it's time to get into the overall prizes. So we've got a prize for third, second, and first. Third prize is a little bit more than just the regular monthly prizes. So $40 for the third place, and that's Tony DeLuca. So congratulations, Tony. You get the $40 prize for coming third. Tony ended up with 2,538 points. Just 3 points ahead of him in second place was friend of the pod, Adam Wood. Congratulations, Woodsy. As always, is very competitive in FPL, despite not watching any of it, which totally just bugs me. But anyway, congratulations, Woodsy, on the $80 prize. You were just the 3 points ahead of Tony DeLuca, who was in third. Now, this is the big one. The first place winner, we had a whopping $250 cash prize for first place. So this one was pretty keenly contested. Did see this jumped around a couple of times throughout the season. And it was Vasily who took out the May prize. He took out the overall prize as well. So he was, let me do the math now, 36 points ahead of Woodsy in second. So bit of a gap there.
Big win.
But yeah, very well done there by Vasily. He gets the $250 and we'll be in touch with the four of those gents for their prizes and how we can get them to them. Now, obviously, the overall prizes are important, but obviously, bragging rights amongst the MTAG panel are important too. And it went down for a couple of people here. There was even some changes on the final day. In the final round, the highest placed of all of us was Damo. He was 25th overall in MTAG FPL, followed by Colby in 28th. Almost caught up to Damo.
Let's go.
Colby did very successfully reel me in. It was very close there in the final day. I think you only beat me by a couple of points as well. I can't
1 point, Tommie. 1 point.
Oh.
That's all I need.
You know what really pisses me off about this though, Colby, is I played my triple captain in the final game week because I'd forgotten to play it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess, if you put it on Haaland. Haaland didn't play, and then Isaac blanked as well. And I was like, fucking kidding me. So how many games did Haaland actually, return in? Let's face it, most weeks, right? So, the one week I triple captain him, default, he gives me nothing. So, congratulations, Colby, on, reeling me in and coming second overall and in amongst the panelists.
That's a trophy, me to beat you and Tommie. That's what a scalp you are, mate.
Yeah. Bit of a gap from me back to next, and that's Mikey in 61st. And then Mikey actually overtook George in the final week as well. George in 62nd. So George, I did see that you did beat your partner.
Beat my girlfriend, yeah.
Yeah, so congratulations there.
By 2 spots or something, and I change my team every week. And
I thought you seemed a bit more motivated this season, George.
I almost wonder if you'd be better off just not.
I thought of it. No, I know. Yes, Tommie. Yes.
Shannon's in the comments saying that he's saying how he sucks at fantasy. And in the A-League, he left Brillante as his captain for the whole season in the A-League. So, George, you're not alone there.
In our on the topic of A-League fantasy and Josh Brillante, the 1 week that I was playing Shannon in our sort of head-to-head league, Brillante scored 2 goals. It was the only thing he did all season, and so Shannon beat me. I think it was probably his only win for the season, but it happened to be when I was playing him. So I was like, yeah, great. But look, that's all we've got time for. Obviously, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks everyone for participating and being part of our MTAG football community, whether it was MTAG FPL or the questions that you send us or anything like that. It's been a blast. Really enjoyed this season. So until next time, enjoy the football. Come on.